The atmospheric dome of Kepler 442b's New Horizons settlement hummed with its usual frequency, a low, barely perceptible vibration that every colonist had learned to ignore. Every colonist except James Chun. Emma Vosk, the Xanthari engineer overseeing the colony's structural integrity, watched from her observation platform as the human crouched near the dome's support strut, running his hand along the transparent aluminum framework. His primitive scanner, barely more advanced than the tools her people had used 3 centuries ago, beeped rhythmically in his calloused hands. "You worry too much." "Human," Emma called down, her translucent blue skin rippling with amusement. The Xanthari had been managing atmospheric containment systems for over 400 years. This dome was based on their 3rd-generation technology, perfected and reliable. The harmonics are within acceptable parameters. They always have been. James didn't look up. The resonance frequency shifted by 0.03 Hz yesterday, during the dust storm. Emma's tertiary arms gestured dismissively. Negligible. The compensation algorithms handled it. Barely. James stood, wiping orange Keplerian dust from his knees. The oscillation dampeners were at 94% capacity. If the storm had lasted another hour, but it didn't. Emma descended from the platform, her triple-jointed legs carrying her with liquid grace. "James, you've been here 6 months. I've been engineering domes for 73 years. Trust the mathematics." The human's jaw tightened. That peculiar expression her people had learned meant stubbornness. "I do trust the mathematics. That's why I'm building a second wall." Emma's skin flickered through several colors: surprise, confusion, then a deep purple that humans had learned meant laughter. "A second wall? Inside the dome?" "A secondary pressure containment ring. 40 meters inside the primary structure, anchored to independent foundation pylons." James pulled up holographic schematics from his wrist display. "It won't hold full atmospheric pressure, but it'll provide redundancy and, more importantly, create a counter-resonance structure." "Counter-resonance?" Emma leaned closer, her compound eyes scanning the designs. That's amateur engineering. You'll create interference patterns. The acoustic dynamics alone will stabilize the primary structure through destructive interference." James interrupted quietly. "The secondary wall will be specifically tuned to oscillate in opposition to the primary dome's natural frequency. When the wind shear creates standing waves in the outer shell, the inner wall will absorb and negate them." Emma's skin faded to a neutral gray, the Xanthari equivalent of skepticism. "That's not how it works, James. You can't just add another wall and expect—" "It's exactly how it works." The human's voice carried no arrogance, only tired certainty. "On Earth, we dealt with resonance disasters for centuries. The Tacoma Narrows Bridge, the Millennium Bridge, the Jakarta Towers. Every time we learned the same lesson. The solution isn't stronger materials. It's smarter geometry. Your Earth examples are irrelevant here. Different gravity, different atmospheric composition, different variables, same physics." James began walking toward the construction materials depot. "I've already run the simulations. The Colony Council approved my resource allocation. I start building tomorrow." Emma watched him go, her skin cycling through amused purple again. Humans, so convinced of their primitive solutions. She'd file a formal observation report, of course, noting the waste of resources. But she wouldn't stop him. Let him build his redundant wall. When it did nothing, or worse, when it created the very instabilities he feared perhaps, then he'd understand why the Xanthari didn't need human improvements to their technology. 3 months later, the storm season arrived. Kepler-442b single quotes S. Axial tilt created wind patterns that would have been impossible on Earth-sustained. Velocities exceeding 200 kilometers per hour. Carrying particles of iron oxide that scoured anything in their path. The colony had weathered 7 storm seasons before James arrived. Emma had overseen them all, but this one was different. The atmospheric pressure differential spiked 14% higher than any previous recorded event. The dome's support struts groaned audibly. And for the first time in her 73 years of engineering, Emma saw the oscillation dampeners hit 100% capacity and keep climbing. Structural integrity at 96%, her assistant reported, mandibles clicking with stress. Compensators failing on struts 7, 12, and 18. Emma's skin flashed warning red as she ran to the primary control nexus. The dome was resonating. The wind wasn't just pushing against it, it was finding the structure's natural frequency, amplifying with each gust. Building toward catastrophic harmonic failure. Increase dampener power, she commanded. Already at maximum. Structural integrity at 94%. The oscillations are, the lights flickered. Somewhere in the dome's superstructure, a support cable snapped with a sound like thunder. Emma's hands flew over the controls, her forearms a blur. Shut down non-essential systems. Reroute power to structural supports. Deploy emergency stabilization fields. Nothing worked. The mathematics were simple and terrible. The dome was going to fail. Then the oscillations stopped, not gradually. Not through dampening? They simply vanished. Emma stared at her readouts, her skin cycling through confused colors. What happened? Her assistant zoomed the external cameras toward the dome's interior. There, 40 meters inside the primary structure, James's secondary wall stood vibrating visibly, absorbing the resonance frequencies like a tuning fork swallowing sound. The second wall, Emma whispered. It's oscillating in exact opposition to the primary structure. She pulled up the acoustic analysis, and the truth revealed itself in elegant mathematical beauty. James's wall wasn't just a redundant barrier. It was a precisely engineered counter-resonator, tuned to the exact frequencies that would destabilize the primary dome. Every wave the storm created, every harmonic that built toward failure, the inner wall caught and canceled through destructive interference. The human had turned the entire dome into a massive dampening system. The storm raged for 14 more hours. The secondary wall vibrated continuously, sometimes visibly shaking, but the primary dome remained stable, rock solid. When the wanes finally died, structural integrity read 99.7% higher than it had been before the storm. The microfractures in the support struts actually stabilized by the counter-oscillations. Emma found James in the agricultural sector, checking on the hydroponic systems that had continued operating throughout the crisis. I owe you an apology, she said quietly. James looked up, surprised. You listened to the warning and didn't override my construction. That's all I needed. But I laughed. I dismissed your solution as primitive. It is primitive. James smiled slightly. The Xanthari engineered domes to withstand force. Humans engineer them to redirect it. Neither approach is wrong. But sometimes primitive solutions work because they're simple enough to be elegant. Emma's skin shifted to a warm amber respect and acknowledgement. The Colony Council wants to retrofit all our settlements with secondary walls. They're calling it the Chun configuration. They can call it whatever they want. James returned to his crop diagnostics. As long as it keeps people safe. As Emma left the agricultural sector, she reflected on what she'd learned. The galaxy was full of species with advanced technology, elegant solutions, and centuries of refinement. But sometimes, just sometimes, what you needed wasn't the most advanced answer. Sometimes you needed a human who understood that the best way to fight a wave wasn't to build a stronger wall, but to create another wave going the opposite direction. Behind her, James whistled quietly as he worked, and the dome hummed with perfect, stable harmony.